Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with another catch-up wrap-up. I think I mentioned this in a video that may have already gone up, but I'm actually having to refilm a couple of these, which is very disheartening. So I am just going to put up pictures for most of these because it saves a little bit of time. I have a couple that were easy to get to, but yeah, I just didn't feel like digging through to find these so I can review them yet again. But just getting into it, as always, the content warnings will be listed in the description box. I will also link people and channels I mention. Yeah, let's jump into it. So, the first one I'm going to talk about today is We Deserve Monuments by Jazz Hammonds. This is a contemporary novel. We're following our main character, Avery, and she lives in, I want to say it's like Washington, D.C. It's been a while, obviously, since I read it, but she's from like a big city. And she is out there as a lesbian, and she feels comfortable being out. And then, very suddenly, her and her mother and father end up moving down south to a small town in, I think, Georgia, because her grandmother, her mom's mother, is really, really sick. Like, that she has, I believe, cancer, and she's kind of running out of time. And so this is a sort of last chance to kind of get the family together and for Avery to meet her for the first time, or for the first time in a long time. And also the relationship between Avery's mother and the grandmother is very, very difficult. Like they were basically estranged up to this point. When they get to the town, it is a very different environment, much less accepting of gay people. So Avery is in the closet again, basically. So that's something that she's struggling with, but also the grief and the, like, all of the really complicated emotions that being around her grandmother for the first time, or at least for the first time in a long time, are bringing up in her. And there's like this huge, like, secret, like basically this big reason that her mother and her grandmother don't talk anymore, and nobody will tell Avery what it is, but it's like very heavily present in their interactions. And there's all this like family history and family pain that Avery is trying to figure out, and that may be connected to some things that happened in the town's past. And to sort of balance out all of that really heavy emotional stuff, she does also end up making friends with two local girls. I loved their friendship, and one of them, maybe it turns into more than friendship. And so that was just a really nice counterbalance to the really heavy aspects of this book, while not cheapening those either. So I absolutely loved this novel. First off, I loved Avery, like, from the get-go. I just felt for her so much. I loved her characterization. I loved how, like, bright and, like, friendly and loving she is, and seeing her struggle with these really difficult family things that have, like, very little to do with her, if anything. Like, I understand why, like, one of the things that I think this book does a really good job of showing is that adults sometimes handle things really badly as well. And I think that's important to show, and I understand why characters would make the decision to keep things from Avery, or to keep things just from people in general. I'm not saying that's a good decision, but I understand it. But it's still, like, I hurt so much on Avery's behalf, and I think that is a testament to how brilliant Jazz Hammonds is as a writer. Because, like I said, I loved Avery's characterization. I felt for her. I mentioned that I absolutely loved the friendship between the three girls. Like, it brought me so much joy to see them sort of like lean on each other, and like especially Avery, given what she's going through. But of course the other girls also have things that they're dealing with, and that comes up as well. And just the way that they are there for each other was lovely. There is a part where, like, there's conflict near the end of the book that affects that friendship, but I think that was handled really well. Like, it makes sense why that would happen, and in spite of that conflict, the friendship was just a standout part of the book for me. And I think the way that the, like, family secrets and family grief, family hurt, I think all of that was handled so well, because, like I was alluding to, it is, like, very believable why everybody involved would make these bad choices. And so we can understand that, but then we also are so frustrated seeing how that has, like, bled into other characters' lives who didn't do anything wrong, or, you know, who had nothing to do with this. And I think that, like, especially we see that in the characterization of Mama Letty, who is the grandmother. Like, she is such an interesting character, because there are times when you love her, and there are times where it is so frustrating and upsetting to read like what she, like, says to people, or like the way that she raised her daughter, and how that trauma, like, affected her. Like, I just think that the book really makes you understand everyone's position. You might still have like feelings and opinions on who handled things better, but I think that it really humanizes everybody involved in a way that was really beautiful and really moving. And that is like even aside from how like emotional and moving all of the like the way that grief is dealt with, or sort of like in process grief of like losing this person in their family who they have very complicated feelings for, or for in Avery's case, who's like she's just getting to know, but she's also this person who has really hurt her mom. Like I said, the like friendship and these moments of humor I think balanced out the heavy parts without like overshadowing them or like feeling inappropriate. I think the way this book looks at the intersection of race and sexuality was really interesting and really smart, and really just, again, compassionate. And I also think that the connections between like historically things that have happened in this town and in just America in general, and the way that that can play out in just one or two families, I think all of that was really well balanced too. So I thought this was fantastic. I'm so glad I picked it up. I think it was Ashley, who I think she just changed her channel name. She used to be Bookish Realm. I will put her new channel name below. But I think it was Ashley that I first heard about this one from, and it was fantastic. I loved it. 5 stars, obviously. Next, I finished Keedie by Elle McNichol. This is a prequel to, I think it was her debut novel, which was A Kind of Spark, which I absolutely loved. That one follows a young girl named Addie. She lives in Scotland and she is autistic, and it is about her determination to get her small town to build a monument to honor the lives of some women who were burned as witches several hundred years ago. And her town just kind of wants to like forget about that, not talk about it. And she's like, no, this is wrong. And so we also learn a lot about what it is like for Addie being autistic in this community. She does have an older sister who is also autistic, and her other sister is not. So we get some like family dynamics as well. And so, like I said, this book is the prequel to that one. And we're actually following Keedie, who is Addie's older sister, who is also autistic. And this is a very short book. It's like fairly, I guess like fairly slice of life. So we're mostly just following Keedie like in her experience, like as she just navigates the world. This is set several years before A Kind of Spark, and so Addie has not been diagnosed as autistic, or like that isn't something I think that her family is aware of yet. But like Keedie is starting to pick up on the fact that they may have this thing in common. And Keedie actually is a twin. And so the fact that she and her twin has this big difference between them, that becomes kind of something that the book deals with as well. And I love Elle McNichol. I really enjoyed this book as well. Something I think that it really highlights, which is a really important thing to have in stories, especially for young kids, is that yes, Keedie and Addie are both autistic, and there are ways in which their experiences overlap, but they are still individuals. Like no neurodivergent person is going to have the exact same experience as another just because they have the same sort of like difference or diagnosis. And I think this book shows that in a way that is really accessible. I enjoyed Keedie as a main character. I think that the like sister dynamics and family dynamics in general were just integrated into the story in a really interesting way. We also see a lot of the horribly abusive school environment that Keedie is forced to put up with, that she shouldn't have to put up with. And because we know how that has affected Addie in A Kind of Spark. And so to kind of see Keedie realizing what's going on and like kind of the reason that she is so ready to come to Addie's defense later on when she starts having some of the same experiences. So that's part of the story. I thought that was really well done. Overall, I liked this one a little less than A Kind of Spark. I think like I just wanted, like I loved Addie as a main character. I adored her. And even though that one is also a very short book, I feel like the story and the time spent on her character were really well balanced. Like I still feel like I really got to know her and love her. And with Keedie, like, obviously she is a very different person, has a different personality, and I did still really like Keedie, and I felt for her, and I was invested in her story, but I think I just wanted more focus on her personality, like in the way that we got a focus on Addie in the other book, if that makes sense. Yeah, but 4 stars, really enjoyed it. I continue to love Elle McNichol. Next, I finished The Magical Unicorn Society, and I don't remember who the author is. This is not one of the books I have with me, so I will put that in captions. And this is a sort of like fantasy picture book set up as a like it's set up as like a fantasy nonfiction book almost, because it's about like these different like unicorns and like their habitats and like what they look like and what they do and things like that. I really love folklore books, and so this is a sort of like folklore book or folklore adjacent book that my mom and my sister got me like quite a while ago actually. And first off, the art and the design I loved. I thought it was beautiful. It's just really pretty to look at. I liked, you know, the different stories about the unicorns. Honestly, the biggest detractor from this book for me, and maybe this is going to sound like a little silly or nitpicky, but there were multiple times in the book when they'd be talking about like a species of unicorn and they're like, here's where they are found, but it's hard for them to find a habitat now. And I don't know, just something about the way it was done, I feel like it was a glaring omission to, like, it would have been such a great opportunity to use these fantasy creatures to talk about, like, actual conservation measures. And I'm not saying that, like, every fantasy, like, fun story has to have that, but I'm saying that since this book brought up the idea of conservation, I thought it was extremely odd that it did not at all tie it to the real world. These were just stories about unicorns. I think that would have been fine as well. But because they brought up the idea of, you know, caring about animal habitats and like conservation and all of that, I think that this would have been a really wonderful opportunity to sort of bridge these like fantasy stories with an actual real life issue. Like, what a great way to get kids invested in caring about our animals. You know what I mean? Anyway, so like 3 stars. It was pretty to look at, but I don't know. I feel like if you're going to bring up such a big topic, you need to do something with it, you know? Next, I read Women in Art, 50 Fearless Creatives Who Inspired the World, written and illustrated by Rachel Ignatowski. This is part of a sort of series of nonfiction books. There's like 50 Women in Science, 50 Women in Sports, and this is, of course, the one about artists. I loved this. I have read the science one, which I also loved. I am just so into this whole series. I love the color palette and like the graphic design elements, like the art elements. And I really loved the variety of women that the author and illustrator like highlighted. There's a really good mix of some really well-known ones, but a lot of underappreciated female figures who were these incredible artists. And I also think the variety was great in terms of the kind of art that they made. Like, it wasn't all visual arts, or it wasn't all one specific kind of visual arts, so I thought that was really cool and important. Yeah, I'm really impressed with this series. I love it. I think it would be a great one if you are, I don't know, if you work in education, or like if you even just like have young kids in your life. I just think this was such a cool idea, not just for young girls, but just like young children in general. I think this is a really great resource or series. I love this one. I give it 5 stars. And I also think that this is a really good length of like mini biography. Like, I think it does a great job of giving you an actual story of this person's life. Like, it feels like you got enough of a feeling for who they are that it can excite you to look up more, but it doesn't feel like you just got bullet points, if that makes sense. I don't know like what age this is intended for, because like, you know, there is quite a bit of text for very young readers, but I thought this was wonderful. 5 stars. Next, I read Evidence by Mary Oliver. This is one of her poetry collections, of course. And I don't have a lot of specifics to say about this one. I did enjoy it. I gave it 4 stars. So there were poems in here that really moved me, or that I really enjoyed or appreciated. But I think the reason this one didn't hit me as hard as some other poems or collections by Mary Oliver is that this was a lot more like nature poetry without connections to other things. And obviously Mary Oliver wrote a lot of poems that center on nature or that highlight nature, and I love that. Like, that's not like a negative for me, but what I have found that I love best about her nature poetry is when she has poems that work on that level, but that also, despite being sort of deceptively like easy to follow or understand even for readers who don't read a ton of poetry, or who are maybe a little intimidated by it, like I definitely used to be. So she has this style that is very approachable, and her poems, including her nature poems, which is a big chunk of her work on that like approachable sort of surface level, not in a bad way, but they also have a sort of deeper underlying like emotional level. I feel like the way that she will like, she will celebrate these like tiny moments in nature. Like, she will like talk about like a bird that she sees, or like a tree like in the forest, or a tree by itself, and like it'll be this really beautiful celebration of the natural world. And also, she will also tie that to like these huge feelings or like themes or ideas about like humanity and what a good life is, and sometimes grief or love or hope. I just really love the way that she does those things simultaneously in some of her work, or a lot of her work. And in my opinion, this was just more of the straight nature poem, which again is not a bad thing. It's just not what I personally love most from her. So 4 stars for evidence, but I did obviously really enjoy it. And then finally, over the course of a few days, I read 3 different short stories by George MacDonald, who is rapidly becoming one of my favorite classic authors, if not already one of my favorite classic authors. I have sort of half-jokingly described him as like my favorite Victorian, but yeah, I don't know if it's even half joking anymore. Anyway, so I read 3 short stories by him, and I'm just going to talk about them all together. And I'm going to try to keep it brief because obviously you don't want to give a long synopsis for a story that's so short, but also because I should have taken very detailed notes as I was reading, but I didn't. So not only am I refilming this after filming it much longer ago, but also I am trying to remember specific thoughts about 3 stories that I am kind of mixing up in my head a little bit. So I actually had to look up the very basic plot synopsis, but I'm basically just giving you the vibe. The vibe of the plot, the vibe of my thoughts. Here we go. The Giant's Heart is one that I did actually really enjoy. The character names are very silly, and that was a little distracting, but if you can get past that, I thought it was a really interesting story. It's about, I think it's 2 kids who are trying to defeat a giant. And it turns out that this giant keeps his heart somewhere else, like somewhere separate, and that's why nobody has been able to kill him or defeat him. And so it's like an adventure story. And one of the things that I think is really interesting about George MacDonald is that he has stories that you can think about so many different symbols and ideas that he could be talking about or was talking about, but it doesn't feel like straight up allegory, and I just find that a very interesting combination. Then The Golden Key. It might be my favorite of the 3 that I'm talking about. I don't remember. But I thought the symbolism and the like character growth and development of this one really stood out to me, despite the fact that, like I said, I'm mixing up some of the story details. Because another thing that I just enjoy across the board about George MacDonald's writing is that even in his very short works, or even in his very like fairy tale feeling works, I feel like you get a really good amount of character depth, considering how short the stories are and considering the sort of like fairy tale category or genre. Like, usually that's not a focus of those, but he's one of the authors who I think does it really well. And then finally, I read Cross Purposes and The Shadows. So like, these are 2 very short stories that are sometimes paired together as a whole, and sometimes not. In Cross Purposes, we are following 2 kids who are brought to fairyland, essentially, or like the fairies are trying to bring them to fairyland. I think one of them through kidnapping and one of them through like persuasion. And the thing that stood out to me the most about this one was like, I enjoyed how like whimsical and playful it felt. Like the tone of this one was very light overall, but I also really loved the sort of class discussion, because of the 2 kids, one of them is a young girl from a noble family and one is a young boy from a commoner or like peasant family. And of course she starts out, you know, very snobby towards him, but as they go through these adventures and these trials together, she really starts to realize that she misjudged him, and I thought that was done well, again, considering how short the story is. And then The Shadows is a very odd story, and like, I'm not even quite sure why it was paired with Cross Purposes. I don't know if that was like a publisher decision rather than George MacDonald, or if he had a reason for it that I just don't know. Very possible. But that one is more about like it really is just about like shadows and sort of like the like other world, the fairy world. I have been sitting here trying to think of a concise way to just like give you the general idea of the story for that one, and I cannot. Like, I don't know how to explain it, so I think I am literally just going to throw a screenshot of like the Wikipedia page or something onto the screen here, and I will also link to that below if that is more accessible for you. Yeah, because I really can't describe it. So anyway, ending on a bit of a jumbled note there. Let me know though if you have read any of these or if you're interested in them. I do love George MacDonald, so despite how much trouble I was having differentiating these short stories and the fact that I wouldn't count these as my favorite things by him, I'm still excited to read more from him. So anyway, let me know your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye! And I also hope I don't have to refilm this again.